The gala was in full swing, and I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered with me. The chandeliers sparkled like stars, reflecting the opulence of the event, while the elegantly dressed guests laughed and toasted to life. I should have been happy. After all, my husband, President David Carter, was by my side, and he had plans to surprise me that night. But there was something in the air that wouldn't let me be at peace. "Emily, you look beautiful," David said, with that smile that always made me feel special. He looked stunning in his tailored suit, but the worry etched in his eyes made me anxious. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, of course." I smiled, trying to hide the whirlwind of thoughts. But the truth was, my heart was restless, as if it were waiting for something I didn't yet know. At that moment, he stepped away for a few moments, and I found myself scanning the room, trying to distract myself. That's when I saw Sarah, my best friend, leaning against one of the columns, watching the scene with an intense gaze. There was something about her expression that unsettled me. She didn't seem as happy as she should have been. "Don't you think she seems a bit distant?" I asked David when he returned, discreetly pointing towards Sarah. "She's just an observer, dear. Sometimes people prefer to stay in the shadows and enjoy the party." "Don't worry about it," David replied, pulling me closer to him. It was then that the music stopped, and an unexpected attention turned toward us. David, with an elegant gesture, pulled a small velvet box from the inner pocket of his jacket and, with a sparkle in his eyes that I only saw when it came to me, opened it. What I saw left me speechless. A stunning necklace, encrusted with diamonds, shining brighter than all the chandeliers in the room combined. "Emily, this is a symbol of my love for you. A well-deserved gift for the most incredible woman in the world," he declared as the audience began to applaud. I felt my heart race, a mix of joy and apprehension flooding my being. "David, it's too beautiful. You didn't have to. I wanted to. You deserve all this and much more," he said, delicately placing the necklace around my neck. The crowd cheered, and I smiled, but that uncomfortable feeling didn't go away. As I tried to recover from the surprise, I noticed that Sarah had slipped out of sight. A chill ran down my spine. What was happening with her? Why did she seem so troubled? "Let's dance," David suggested, pulling me onto the floor. As we danced, I tried to focus on his affection and the sweet words he whispered in my ear, but my mind was elsewhere. Sarah's gaze haunted me. After a few songs and smiles, the party began to disperse. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, but the unease only grew. When I finally returned home with David, the joy of the gala seemed to have evaporated. "You had a wonderful night, didn't you?" David asked as he parked the car. "Yes, it was amazing," I replied, but my voice didn't convey the excitement it should have. He noticed, of course. "Emily, what's going on? You seem distant." I'm a bit tired. The party was intense," I lied, forcing a smile. But in my heart, a shadow was growing. Sarah's expression, her cold, calculating gaze, replayed in my mind. What was she thinking? I knew she admired him, but something in the way she looked at the necklace made me feel a pang of fear. When we got home, David turned to me, searching my eyes. "If you're not okay, you can tell me. I want to know what's going on in your head." "I'm fine, David. Just a little overwhelmed," I lied again. But I knew it wasn't just that. The gift that should have been a symbol of love felt, in some way, like a burden. As he walked away to prepare something for us, I lost myself in thought. The necklace sparkled in the soft light of the lamp, but what did it really mean? Was it genuine love, or just a way to hide what was to come? And Sarah, my friend, was becoming a stranger. What would I do with this growing jealousy inside me? The questions echoed in my mind as I wondered if the magical night that had begun with so much glamour was about to turn into something much darker. The afternoon breeze was gentle, but my heart pulsed with the intensity of a storm. I met Mark at a discreet cafe, away from curious eyes. He was an old acquaintance, someone who always had access to information that few could imagine. When we sat down, his gaze was calculating, gleaming with an idea that intrigued me. "Sarah, I know you're going through a tough time with Emily. That necklace was a low blow from David, wasn't it?" Mark said, leaning over the table, his words sounding like a dissonant melody. "But what if I told you I have something that could change the game?" "I'm listening," I replied, trying to hide the anxiety growing inside me. "What do you know about the president?" "I have information that could destabilize him. Secrets that, if exposed, could create the perfect storm. And you might be the key to that, Sarah." He smiled, and the idea of an alliance began to take shape in my mind. It was the opportunity one needed not only to seek revenge, but also to win Emily back for myself. "And what do you suggest?" I asked, my voice sounding firmer than I felt. Mark began to detail a plan, and as he spoke, adrenaline coursed through my veins. A part of me hesitated, but the other craved control, to be the protagonist of my own story. Later, when I returned home, Emily's insecurity began to weigh heavily on my mind. I knew that the anonymous messages she was starting to receive were just the beginning. "What are you doing, Sarah?" I asked myself out loud, alone in my room. But the answer was clear. I was doing this for love, or at least that was the story I told myself. The next morning, Emily called me, her voice trembling on the phone. "Sarah, can you come over? I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me." "Of course, I'm on my way," I replied, trying to hide the excitement that was flooding in. When I arrived, I found Emily with a worried look, her eyes shining with a mix of insecurity and doubt. "I've been receiving strange messages, suggesting that David might be cheating on me. Do you think that's true?" Her question sounded like music to my ears, and I struggled not to let satisfaction show on my face. "Emily, I don't know, but you know how complicated the political world is. Sometimes men get lost in their ambitions. Maybe you should pay attention," I said, planting a seed of doubt in her mind. "But he loves me, right? He gave me that necklace." She glanced at the necklace, and I could see insecurity grow, like a shadow spreading across her face. "Love is complicated, dear. Sometimes what looks like love can just be a facade," I replied, trying to maintain a supportive tone while manipulation unfolded in my mind. The tension building between us was palpable, and I knew I was on the right track. In the meantime, David was dealing with the rumors surrounding his marriage, and the idea of undermining him from the inside out seemed increasingly viable. The game was just beginning, and I was willing to play dirty to get what I wanted. After our conversation, I left her house with a feeling of triumph. I had planted doubt and insecurity in Emily, but there was still one last challenge: the rumors surrounding David. I needed more information, something I could use to my advantage. That night, as I looked at the stars through my bedroom window, my heart raced with a mix of anxiety and excitement. What I was doing was dangerous, but the promise of having Emily back by my side was worth every risk. So, I decided that my alliance with Mark wouldn't just be a strategy. It would be my secret weapon. "Wait, Sarah." A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. It was David, who entered my room without warning. "Are you okay? I noticed you were talking to Emily." "I'm great, David. Just trying to be a good friend," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "How are you handling the rumors?" I know it must be tough. He sighed, and the tension in the room escalated. Tough, but I'll deal with it. Don't worry about me, Sarah. But in truth, I was more worried about what was to come. The game was underway, and I was determined to win it. It was a sunny morning when Sarah decided it was time to put her plan into action. I glanced at my phone, the screen glowing with text messages from Emily. She was anxious, a mix of insecurity and distrust permeating her words. Did you see the necklace? What did you think? She was so excited yet so vulnerable. I needed to act cautiously, but the opportunity to sow discord was irresistible. Hey, Em, want to grab coffee later? I have something important to discuss, I replied, trying to sound casual while my heart raced with anticipation. The truth was, I had already planned what I was going to say. As soon as she agreed, a satisfied smile spread across my face. Later, we met at a charming cafe downtown, away from the curious eyes of reporters. The atmosphere was peaceful, but my heart was pounding. When Emily arrived, the sunlight illuminated her face, but there was something dark in her eyes. Hi, Sarah. What did you want to tell me? She asked, her tone mixing curiosity and apprehension. You know I will always be by your side, right? You are my best friend. I started, keeping my gaze locked on her eyes. But I can't help but worry about you and David. He's a very powerful man, and powerful men often have secrets. Emily's expression changed, and I realized I had captured her attention. Secrets? What do you mean by that? Her voice trembled slightly, and I knew I was on the right track. I heard some rumors about him. You know, things that might not be good. Do you remember what happened with that senator a few months ago? He seemed perfect too, but he had a dark side. It's possible that David is keeping something that could hurt you, Em. Are you serious? She replied, panic starting to creep into her voice. But he loves me. He gave me that necklace. It's a symbol of our love. Emily's defensiveness was evident, but I knew I needed to push her further toward insecurity. Love is complicated. Sometimes it's just a facade, I replied, holding her hand. I just want you to be happy, but you need to be cautious. I'm not saying David is doing anything wrong, but it's good to stay alert. Emily looked at the cafe, lost in thought. And what if he is? I can't imagine he would do that to me. Her gaze was distant, and I could almost see the gears in her mind turning. I know it's hard, but you need to trust your instincts. I'll be by your side. No matter what happens, I said, forcing a tone of solidarity. Just be careful. As we left the cafe, the atmosphere between us was charged with tension. While I walked beside her, a growing satisfaction spread throughout my body. The game was just beginning, and I was getting closer to getting what I wanted. That night, David and Emily had an important event at the White House, and I could feel the tension hanging in the air. They were trying to maintain the appearance of a perfect couple, but the disconnection was palpable. I watched them from a distance, every gesture and every exchanged glance between them. It was as if I were watching a show where their emotions were my puppets. Look how uncomfortable they are, I murmured to myself, a satisfied smile forming on my lips. This is just the beginning. As they tried to behave like the ideal couple, I knew that the seed of doubt had been planted, and in the coming weeks, that doubt would blossom into something much bigger. That night, as the party unfolded, I spotted Emily alone in a corner. Her gaze was lost, and the necklace David had given her sparkled under the lights of the venue. I couldn't help but approach her. Hey, friend, I said, trying to sound casual. Are you okay? I am, she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Just thinking. About David? I asked, my heart racing. He seems distant, doesn't he? Maybe, she murmured, looking down as if the answers were hidden in the floor. And you know I'm here for you, right? If you need to talk about anything, I offered, watching her absorb every word. Thank you, Sarah. You're a true friend, she replied, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The tide was changing, and I was ready to ride the wave of betrayal. Morning light streamed through my bedroom window, but I couldn't find peace. The previous night had been tumultuous, filled with suspicions and uncertainties that seemed to pile up over me like dark clouds. I got up, still caught in my thoughts, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. As the water boiled, my heart raced. The memory of the necklace David had given me was still fresh in my mind, but somehow, it now felt more like a burden than a symbol of love. That's when my phone buzzed on the table. An anonymous message, another reminder that something was wrong in my marriage. The message read, "Do you really know your husband? Beware of appearances." I read it aloud, feeling a chill run down my spine. What did this mean? What else didn't I know? Sarah walked into the kitchen, her carefree demeanor suggesting that life was a fashion show. "Good morning, friend. Did you sleep well?" she asked, grabbing a slice of bread from the table. "Not really," I replied, trying to hide my unease. I received another message. "Now it seems like someone is trying to warn me about David." Sarah stopped chewing and looked at me with a concerned expression. "What do you mean by that? Anonymous messages? That's scary, Emily." She moved closer, as if she were a counselor. "You need to make sure he's not doing anything wrong. You know, power can change people." "I know," I murmured, remembering David's confused look from the night before. He seemed so distant, so different from the man I had fallen in love with. But I don't want to think that way. He loves me. Love isn't everything, dear. Sometimes appearances can be deceiving, Sarah said with a certainty that made me hesitate. "Have you thought about asking him directly? Or maybe investigating a little more?" The idea of investigating David was disturbing. I didn't want to become a suspicious person, but doubt had already settled in my heart. I don't know, Sarah. That seems very extreme, I replied, trying to convince myself not to go down that path. However, the weight of the anonymous messages and Sarah's words began to affect me. "Emily, I'm here for you. If you don't do this, you might regret it. Sometimes, the truth is the only way out," she insisted, her penetrating gaze making me feel a mix of comfort and unease. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, Sarah was meeting with Mark. The plan they were plotting was dark and calculated. What I didn't know was that the friendship I believed I had with Sarah was turning into a game of manipulation. "We need to act fast, Sarah," Mark said, looking at the documents he had managed to obtain. "If we can expose the corruption, not only do we take down David, but we also put you in a position of power." "I just want Emily by my side," Sarah replied, her tone revealing a dark determination. "Once David is out of the way, she'll see that I'm the only one who can offer her the security she needs." As they schemed their intrigues, I found myself in a labyrinth of emotions. Distrust was growing in me like a shadow, and the idea of confronting David made me even more anxious. What would I say to him? How could I ask about something I wasn't sure of? Later, David came home, his radiant smile lighting up the room. "Hi, my love. How was your day?" he asked, wrapping me in a tight hug. I felt his warmth, but doubt still gnawed at me inside. "David, we need to talk," I said, trying to find the right words. "I received some strange messages." He frowned, concerned. "Messages? About what?" "About you, about us." I replied, feeling my heart race. I just want to know if everything is okay between us. He looked into my eyes, and for a moment, everything seemed to settle. Emily, you know I love you. There's nothing between me and anyone else. You are everything to me. But even with his answer, a part of me was still uncertain. I wanted to believe him, but the seed of doubt, planted by Sarah, had already started to sprout. As he spoke, I wondered if I could truly trust his words, or if it was all just another illusion. The press conference was scheduled for 10 in the morning, and as I prepared myself, a sense of anguish settled in my chest. I had received a message from Sarah the night before, suggesting that something big was about to happen. That morning, the air was thick with tension, and my mind whirled with the doubts Sarah had planted. What was she plotting? I arrived at the press room and found a controlled chaos. Journalists were gathered, all eager for news about the government. My eyes scanned the room until I finally spotted Sarah. She was there, next to Mark, wearing a dishonest smile that didn't seem well-intentioned at all. My heart raced in my chest. I knew something was about to unfold. "Emily, you came," Sarah exclaimed, as if she were genuinely happy to see me. "You won't want to miss this." "What are you talking about, Sarah?" I asked, trying to keep calm. "What's happening?" "Wait and see," she replied, winking at me as she turned to Mark, who was adjusting a microphone. The conference began, and David entered the room, his demeanor confident, but I could sense a slight unease in his expression. He started talking about his government's policies and the achievements that had been made, but he was soon interrupted by Mark. "Sorry, Mr. President," Mark said, his voice cutting like a blade. "We have some revelations that we believe are in the public interest." My heart sank as Mark began to present documents that, according to him, proved corruption within David's government. The room fell silent, and I felt my world crumbling. Was it all a setup? The anonymous messages, the conversations I had with Sarah, everything seemed to fit into a horrifying puzzle. I looked at David, who was visibly shocked, his expression shifting from confidence to disbelief. "This is a lie," he shouted, but his voice sounded weak in the face of the avalanche of evidence Mark was presenting. "These documents are forged. You can try to deny it, but the evidence is concrete," Mark retorted, a triumphant smile on his face. I needed to get out of there. The pressure was unbearable. I stood up, but before I could take a step, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Emily, you can't just leave. You need to hear this," she said, in a tone that tried to be convincing but failed miserably. "You knew about this, didn't you?" I asked, anger taking over me. "You were behind all of this." "I did this for you," she replied, her voice trembling but filled with a determination that scared me even more. "David was manipulating you, and you didn't realize it. I just wanted to protect you." "Protect or destroy?" I shot back, feeling a wave of betrayal wash over me. "You're not my friend, Sarah. You wanted what I have." The press conference had turned into a spectacle, with journalists taking photos and asking questions. I felt like I was in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The truth was unfolding before me, and yet I couldn't believe that Sarah, my best friend, was behind it all. "I never wanted it to come to this," Sarah said, her words now sounding desperate. "But you need to understand that I love David too. He is the man who should be by my side." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. She really thought she could simply take my place? "You don't know what love is, Sarah. This is obsession." Deep down, I knew the moment to confront her had arrived, but the conference was still ongoing, and David was struggling to hold it together. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for help, and I realized that the only way to resolve this was to expose the truth that Sarah was trying to hide. Our gazes met for a brief moment, and I understood that, regardless of what was happening, I needed to be strong. "You won't be able to destroy me, Sarah," I declared, feeling determination grow within me. "The truth always comes out, and you can't escape it." The conference was intensifying, and I knew that the scandal Sarah had created could ruin David's career. But I wouldn't let that happen, not without a fight. The press conference had been a true horror show. I was still in shock, Sarah's words echoing in my mind as David and I prepared to confront her. He had the determined look of someone who wouldn't be shaken by yet another betrayal. I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for him, for us. "Emily, are you ready?" David asked me, a mix of concern and confidence in his voice. I nodded, trying to ignore the cold feeling in my stomach that accompanied me. We were about to unmask someone who claimed to be our friend, who had infiltrated our lives like a wolf in sheep's clothing. When we entered the office where Sarah was waiting, the atmosphere felt electric. She was sitting there, an arrogant smile on her lips. Ah, the perfect couple finally united. "What can I do for you?" she said with a cynical tone. "Sarah, we know what you did," David began, his voice steady. "You and Mark plotted to destroy our marriage and my career. And now, it's time for you to pay for that." She raised an eyebrow, as if she wasn't worried at all. "Do you have proof? Because all I see is a desperate couple trying to save a relationship that was doomed to fail." "Actually, we have more than proof. We have the truth," I interrupted, feeling adrenaline pulse through my veins. "You took advantage of my insecurities and planted lies to drive me away from David. You're not a friend, Sarah. You're a traitor." Her smile faded, and her eyes turned cold and calculating. "Do you really think this is about friendship? I've always wanted what you had, Emily, and now I'm going to get it." Her words echoed in me, like a distant echo of someone who had lost control. "You won't get anything, Sarah," David said, stepping toward her. "You're going to answer for your actions. And I'm sure the police will love to hear about the break-in at my house and the documents that you and Mark stole." Sarah's expression quickly changed, and I realized her confidence was slipping away. "You can't do this. This is just a power play, David," she shouted, but her voice no longer had the same strength. "This isn't a game, Sarah. It's real life, and you made your choices." David continued, now with a calmer, yet still firm, tone. "We have all the evidence necessary for you and Mark to be held accountable for your actions. You won't get away with this." The door swung open abruptly, and two police officers entered, with serious expressions. "David Carter?" one of them said, looking at us. "We received a report about a possible conspiracy. We're here to investigate." Sarah looked at me, and I felt a wave of satisfaction seeing the panic on her face. "No, this is a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong," she screamed, but now she was cornered. "In fact, you did," I said, feeling a new strength take hold of me. "You tried to ruin the lives of two people out of pure ambition and envy." The officers began collecting evidence, while David and I exchanged glances, relieved to finally have the situation under control. The truth had prevailed, and Sarah, who had always been a force to be feared, was now at the mercy of the law. After the police left, David and I sat down, exhausted but relieved. "Are you okay?" he asked, holding my hand. "Yes, now I am," I replied, feeling a wave of love for him. "I'm sorry I doubted you." "Don't worry, we all have our insecurities," he said, looking into my eyes. The important thing is that we're together, and now we know we can face anything as long as we're side by side. In that moment, I realized that true love overcomes any kind of manipulation. Sarah had tried to destroy everything we had built, but instead, she had brought us closer together. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it alongside David. Sarah would face the consequences of her actions, and the two of us would have a fresh start, stronger than ever.